working for SC for All. And we are here for the session in Advancing Industrialization through Renewables in Eastern and Southern Africa. We are going to have a panel of 5 people. And just to introduce a little bit the topic, I think in this kind of conference we talk about industrialization. We keep talking a lot about electricity access, but we don't have to forget that electricity access is an SDG goal. SDG wears the word development, and development will come primarily through the industrialization and the development of the productive use of energy. That's why we are going to have this session in which we are going to talk not only about industrialization, but how to strengthen the regional value chain and competitiveness in the different sectors like agro-processing or construction. So without further delay, I'm going to call all our participants to the panel. So please, Jean Lemaitre from BioInvest. Then James Origa, Santillana Kamikaze, Jackson Mutonga, and Tobias Hobak. And sorry if I messed up with any of your names, because as you can see in my accent, I'm Spanish and I have difficulties with certain sounds. So, just for everyone, we are a small family here. Do not hesitate because it's early, we just woke up, it's the last day of the conference. But please, if you have any question, you want to intervene, do not hesitate. Let's try to make it as dynamic as possible. That being said, we are going to start first by a lightning round of questions. Then we will do a second one. And then we will keep a lot of time for the questions for the audience. So please, the second you have a question, write it down. Just a small comment. Let's avoid that questions turns into comment that lasts for 10 minutes, please. Otherwise, I will cut it. And that's the only problem. Okay, and without further ado, so the first person is going to be Jean Lemaitre from BioInvest. So the first thing I will ask you is to introduce yourself. And then my question to you would be if you could introduce BioInvest mandate, so your organization mandate, and explain how it approaches investment in renewable power industrial development across Eastern and Southern Africa. And also maybe if you could talk about the type of projects and business model that you are more actively looking to support.
Producers and also C&I companies. Then we also can invest through funds, this also in equity in debt, and in those investments we mainly we can do more riskier investments, for example equity in funds that would provide equity for developers in development, equity and also construction equity for IPPs, but also funds that would invest in mini-grids for solar home systems or clean cooking. Within the direct investments where my team takes part on, our main focus nowadays is IPPs, is big IPPs or small-scale IPPs, and also CNIs, as we noticed, they are the most commercially viable for our investment team.
Thank you very much for that. So our next person is going to be James Origa. So please could you first introduce yourself and also explain how your organization is working on the water sector and how it connects with the broader conversation with renewable energy and industrialization, like really trying to understand that nexus. And also why water infrastructure represents such a significant and often overlooked opportunity for renewable power growth.
Thank you, Irene. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Dr. James Origa. I'm a senior water specialist with the World Bank Group. Presently, I think our participation in this panel you'll see is through the Rural Water Supply Network. The Rural Water Supply Network is a network of organizations working to advance, professionalization and sustainable investments in rural water supply systems across the globe. It has different membership, the DFIs, the World Bank, African Development Bank, UNICEF, Inter-American Development Bank, and a couple of international NGOs. Essentially, the strategic objective is to network, all practitioners in that space for the purposes of curating knowledge on, what's working, what's not working in rural water supply infrastructure and service delivery across the globe, sharing this through a common platform so that we are able to advocate for, more sustainable approaches to investing in rural water supply systems. Just to make the connection, why water is in this energy forum. Building a credible industrialization pathway, will agree with me, requires a prior resolution of two upstream constraints, reliable electricity supply and reliable water supply. I think these are very critical inputs to the industrial development agenda. And this is where we anchor the conversations around, a water and energy nexus approach. If you look at it from that particular perspective, why water, infrastructure is a critical part of this conversation on renewable energy. First is that, water provides an anchor demand for renewable energy. When you look at, rural water, whether it's water abstraction systems, water treatment system, desalination systems, bulk water conveyance system, all this requires a significant amount of, reliable power supply to maintain and to run, these systems. Our experience, the experience of the World Bank Group and other members of the network, water utilities, if you look at the books of water utilities, between 40 to 70% of the day-to-day operating cost is in energy costs. So there's a lot of concerted efforts, to have more, energy efficient pumping systems. A lot of water utilities, water operators in urban areas, in rural areas are increasingly transitioning to renewable energy sources. The days when you had, thousands of DSL pumping systems spread across rural areas is no longer there. The advance of solar pumping system is significantly reducing the cost, of delivering water to populations, both in urban areas and rural areas. So that provides a very strong, nexus conversation. How do we look at water energy nexus as one investment platform, because it's significant in creating sustainable operation and maintenance, for water supply infrastructure. But also, renewable energy powered water infrastructure is a critical enabler or input to the industrialization process, right? So water enables the creation of jobs and opportunities. whether it is agro-processing, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's large-scale irrigation system for food production. All these are powered, and there's an increasing trend of providing renewable energy sources to power this infrastructure. But the current level of practice in our space in the water sector, despite this perspective of water being an anchor demand, for renewable energy, the level of activity is still not what it should be. We still see a lot of diesel-powered systems in rural areas. We still see utilities incurring very huge costs, connected to the grid, when there's a lot of opportunities to transition all this to, more renewable, lower-cost system. So it's still a very big opportunity that is yet to be fully exploited to its potential, and we hope that the conversations happening at this forum will find pathways and ways on how we can deepen the engagement around powering more water infrastructure and renewable energy as opposed to the fossil fuels and the current grid connection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for the next question, Santillana is going to first present, please present your organization. And then my question to you is if you could share how your work connects, again, with renewable energy and industrialization, which is still the topic of this panel, and the economic development, and what gap and opportunity in the market led your organization to focus in this space. Why did you take that decision? What was the strategic thinking behind it? And in what sectors are you finding most receptive to renewable power solutions?
Thank you, Irene. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having the same morning as I am. Very energized. Doesn't look like it. So, my name is Santillana Kamikaze. I am the co-founder of KLK, which is an EPC company that is based in Burundi. When we first started our work in Burundi, we were doing grid works. It was always an energy company. However, we were working in power systems. It was just a partner of the local utility. We were doing grid lines, connecting works for customers of the local utility. And we started doing also a bit of work for the newcomers that were coming into the industry, but they were doing renewable. By renewable, I mean solar systems. At that point when we first started, we were not doing any solar systems. We started doing lines, transmission lines and distribution lines for people who were building mini-grid. That is when we actually realized that there was potential in the industry of solar systems. When we first did the first connecting work for mini-grid, that was a few years back, we did a connection for 5 villages. When we did those lines for 5 villages, it was before the actual solar systems came, meaning the panels, the batteries, and whatnot. We did the lines within a few months for those 5 villages. And by the time we finished, because it was honestly like a no man's land where we were connecting, there was no one. We just installed poles, pulled lines, and waited for the systems. By the time we came back, because the project was over the course of maybe 2 years, by the time we came back for the installations of the system itself, so panels and batteries, that was within maybe at most 10 months. There were villages. There were people coming in, starting to live because they knew there was power coming in. And that is when we had the epiphany. When we do work on the grid, so we basically just pull the lines and we hope for the grid to someday connect and then send. But in Burundi, we have a bit of instability on the grid. And up to very recently, we did not even have enough power generation. So we could still pull lines, but not have electricity flow through. So people were not keen to move to areas where we were pulling the lines because the change was not visible. However, with the solar systems, with those mini-grids, people moved because they knew electricity was coming. So they were bustling. Within 2 years, they were bustling mini-cities, honestly. And that's when I realized we need to change. We need to change the way Calvé operates. If indeed our vision is to provide energy to people in Burundi, we need to move from the traditional systems and move into a far faster acting, which is solar. That is when we created our department for solar. At the question that you asked, how did we move, that was that. Now, what it is that we provide as a service for people to be able to take full advantage of it, as KLK, the rapid implementation of solar systems means people will have electricity within a couple months, just the time it takes us to build those systems. And it's self-contained, so it depends on no one for it to start throwing. So the production hub that we're building right now for people in villages. So we get together with cooperatives. They explain to us the needs they have. We build like productive use hubs. We'll go into a certain village, get together cooperatives, so they usually are farmers or they have cows and whatnot. So they usually need electricity for their pumping system. They need electricity for mills. And whenever you start installing those, 100% you will see new businesses spring. We have weldings, companies that come up. We have new systems which are more service-based. You will have people putting up like internet cafes in remote areas. Here I'm really talking remote areas where you see people opening their world to new technology that were unheard of at that point. So just to give you an example, if we build an electricity hub in a village, you will find they had to travel for miles for them to be able to have access to, maybe if they have administrative work to do, for example. They have to travel miles to have a letter typed, printed, and given. And they always have administrative work to do. But if we put the electricity hub, you will see a computer coming up, you see a printer coming up. Close to the computer, you'll see a salon. You'll have someone, there's a barber shop that comes up. Close to it, you have now an industry of milling that starts working out. So they no longer have to travel with their crops to go and have them milled, because it's easier for them to sell once it's already transformed. So that provides a lot of value-added advantage in terms of moving their business forward. As far as the industries that I see are benefiting a lot from the renewable energy, that is solar based, we have the ones for whom it's critical. Electricity is critical. I'm talking, for example, like dairy. They usually have dairy collections in different plants, different cooperatives. They have to send to dairy plants that have to transform them. But back a few years when we were not able to give them the cooling systems which are solar powered, they will have a lot of losses. But now in the energy hubs, we put cooling systems. They can rent a space, and then they can have, if they don't have enough to send over to the plant, they can store it, and they know it's not going to spoil. So they wait, and then they can give it to the dairy plant whenever they come. So they have way, way less losses. The other sector, but this one I guess it's pretty much everywhere, it's the health sector. Remote health centers have issues with electricity. So if they have to deploy, for example, vaccines, for vaccines, they have to make sure they have, like for a particular vaccine, they have to make sure they have enough kids and children that will be vaccinated with that vaccine, because otherwise they can't open it. If it's opened, it needs to be refrigerated. If it's, otherwise it will be wasted. So that also is alleviated with the fact that we provide them with cooling solutions for that. So the two industries that I find are very critical for them will be healthcare and the dairy industry, are the ones that I deal with at the very least. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Before going to Jackson, I think we are going to go to Tobias just to continue more on the development side. So Tobias, could you please explain introduce yourself and explain what your organization is doing, and also describe what drove you to the focus of the renewable, especially in a power industrial development, and what opportunity gap did you find that make you take that decision? and how your business model is shaped.
Thank you, Irene, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Tobias Hobach. I'm the founder and CEO of Sustain Group, a South Africa-based renewable energy company. We started 10 years ago as a system integrator, moved into EPC, and are now a project developer. Under our brand Sustain Power and Sustain Solar, we've delivered about 100 systems across 19 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, from biogas generators through off-grid, mini-grid, containerized power systems, grid-tied PV and BESS. So we are covering our scope and through our journey the areas of excess energy, on-grid C&I, and are now involved in the development of utility scale projects. So covering a bit of a scope and have evolved, and it has a lot to do with the gaps that you are referring to. Setting up a company in South Africa 10 years ago, the focus was to manufacture, assemble, provide, deliver high quality, decentralized power solutions. Under the Sustain Power brand, those were biogas and natural gas generators, of which we installed quite a number in South Africa primarily, and under the Sustain Solar brand, those were mainly mini-grid and off-grid systems. The idea was to be a high-quality local assembler of solutions required in Africa and assemble those in Africa. So for us, for me, my definition of industrialization always included not only all the obvious benefits of renewable energy, and Santila, I think you explained very well the impact of electrification for industrialization in a rural setting, and we can go possibly a bit more into depth what this means for industries, for grid-connected industries. But for me, there was also always the impact of creating jobs, creating an industry within the renewable energy space itself. And I think that's an area I would like to focus a bit more on throughout the conversation today.
Thank you very much, Tobias. We are now moving to Jackson Mutonga. So if you can maybe talk a little bit about the African Union's agenda for 2063, and what is the role of industrialization and at the heart of the continent, and how the African Union is working to ensure that renewable energy becomes one of the pillars for this transformation in Eastern and Southern Africa.
Thank you. So my name is Jackson Mutonga, and I am working with GIZ African Union, not African Union, so I'm not representing the position of the African Union, but of GIZ and also my personal views. So I work on a continental project, which is, of course, financed by the German government to work with the African Union on accelerating the energy transition in Africa. It's called Engage. Particularly, what I would want to say from the onset is that we don't implement our agenda, we implement the agenda of the African Union. So what that means is we hunger on the strategies and the plans of the African Union. And indeed, the African Union has broad strategies and very specific strategies as well. The broader one being the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. But the most important one is also the African Continental Free Trade Area, where Africa wants to open its borders for intertrade across the borders, for locally manufactured products and stuff produced in local industries, which is very important. Under that Agenda 2063, Africa also has a dream to have the electricity systems across the 55 or 54 member states, depending on who you talk to, interconnected. So our project is working to accelerate the interconnection of the electricity markets across the 54 member states. And we work on the 3 layers, at the continental level, at the regional level, as well as at the national level. So at the continental level, we support the governance structures within African Union and also African Union Development Agency, Howdan EPAD. And specifically here, we are looking at accelerating the development of these interconnectors and the renewable energy generation projects, particularly solar and wind. Within this framework, they have developed what we call the Continental Energy Master Plan and the Howden EPAD. And within this, now we work with them to identify key priority projects, which, together with our colleagues from Get Invest, we assist in structuring this project to bankability in terms of accelerating. Because what we are looking at is making renewable energy available across borders. It doesn't have to be produced within a country. It can be imported from another country and traded. So we are doing also a lot of capacity development for these our partners so that they are able to support this. When you talk of Africa's single electricity market, it's a big dream. It is not a pipe dream, it is achievable. But how do we achieve this? Of course, it will be much more complex than other electricity markets, given the geography of Africa and the complexities among the member states. But the foundations will be the power pools. So within Africa, we have like 5 power pools. And particularly for us, we have a focus on the East Africa power pool and the South Africa power pool. The South Africa power pool, of course, is operational, but the East Africa power pool, we are supporting the stakeholders to operationalize the market. Indeed, we were looking forward to have the market operational sometimes in the course of this year. And from that, then the next step will be to interconnect the 2 power pools so that they can start trading electricity. That said, then that means we will have now renewable energy flowing across 23 member states all the way from Egypt to South Africa. And what this means is also we are seeing new models within the power pools. For example, participation in the power market by individual power producers. You can enter as a member of the power pool. You don't have to go through the national utility. You can go as an aggregator, where some of the aggregators are aggregating the commercial and industrial plants to meet the minimum capacity of 5 megawatts for South Africa, 10 megawatts for East Africa. And we also see new products which are coming up, including battery energy storage to provide the auxiliary services. So at the national level, of course, we are supporting specific country utilities to strengthen them so that they can be commercially viable, or rather provide some level of security for investment because of the bankability of the projects which are connected to the national grids. But by and large, when we have these integrated energy markets within the regions, we have lower costs of the renewable energy, we have higher system stability for industries to grow, and we have more bankable projects because we have increased the predictable markets within the power pools. So that is our idea, so that we can back industrialization within the continent.
Thank you very much for that. So we are going to do a second round of questions, but it's going to be a lightning round, meaning let's take like 2 minutes for questions, so then we have time to discuss with the audience. So we will follow the same order. So the question for Jan is on rising electricity demand from manufacturing and agro-processing and other key industries present both a challenge and an opportunity. So how does BioInvest assess and structure the investments to make sure that they are commercially viable and also that they can provide development, which not always go together?
Yes, thank you. I will focus on these questions on Bio's investments in C&I companies and IPPs. I think for C&I companies who provide solar solutions for manufacturers in the agribusiness or hotels and so on, the key thing for us is to ensure that they have a good credit check policy, meaning that they know the clients they are working with are already active for quite some years, they pay their bills. That's one thing. Secondly, we also want the developer of the C&I to have some experience, that they know what they are doing, that they are also surrounded by good partners, meaning EPCs and O&Ms. And also from the moment they enter into contracts with their clients, that they also have a good idea about how are they going to collect their money. If some people have problems, how can they ensure that they have good policies in place, that money will be recuperated. If we find such a company with all those tools, then of course we want to support them. And one of the things that we can do to make sure that they're even more commercial viable from their business perspective and Bio's business perspective is, for example, to increase the tenure. Now we typically see for C&I companies, tenures are 10 years, 11 years, while Bio can offer up to 13 years, allowing those C&I companies to offer even lower pricing to their clients and also help them in having more clients in their portfolio, and is also increasing for us the portfolio risk. If I look at IPPs, again, we also want them to have experience to develop their projects. If we have a good IPP developer, mainly when they do smaller projects, what we can do is, for example, structure our loan that we are more back-ended, for example, that's what we already did, to include a commercial partner with a lower interest rate, while Bio can keep their same interest rate with a back-ended structure, also reducing the cost for the developer, also allowing them to have more returns for the equity, which makes it also attractive to attract equity investors, and also, how can I say it, to work with lower PPA prices. Of course, developmental, for each project we do, we need to ensure that the ENS regulations are followed. Certainly for C&I companies, the EPC and O&M parties, they need to adhere to standards of working conditions, working labor, and these are all elements that we check during our due diligence and that we also check during monitoring phase. So in that sense, development, the business case or the case is easy, but it always asks continuing monitoring to ensure they adhere to our standards.
Thank you so much. Then for James, the question in this case is going to be about the water system that, I don't know if everyone aware, but it's like a really energy intensive infrastructure in a lot of African countries. Yet the investment in renewable power water infrastructure remains very limited at the moment. So my question to you is, what are the main barriers? Why is that not happening? And what models are showing most promise in terms of unlocking this opportunity?
Thank you, Irene. I think earlier on I had made the case that, there's water infrastructure development is an anchor demand. But some of the barriers to sort of more scale up investment in renewable energy for water infrastructure, what we have seen in our practices over the years, the first one is, this characterization of water as a social good that does not prevent much business opportunity for renewable, energy service providers, especially from the private sector. To a large extent, we sort of see that as a misclassification, in the sense, and we all agree there's a human right, social good element of water. But if you look at the patterns of water use and withdrawals, 70% of global water withdrawals are used for irrigation. Whether it's irrigation scheme, agro-processing, and all that kind. And the other 20% is used for industrialization in manufacturing and other similar sectors. A small part of the total water withdrawals is potable domestic water use, just about 10% of it. It's indeed true that, especially in rural areas, a lot of the water utility services are not very financially attractive. But if the renewable energy sector would look at the totality of water for people, water for production, then you see a different scale of business opportunity. And that sort of rephrases how you frame your business. Instead of just looking at the small 10%, how can you frame meeting the needs of the small 10% of potable water needs, but also target your investment in such a way that you tap into the opportunity, the other 90%, 70% in irrigation, and the 20% in manufacturing, that will, in a way, lower the cost for the portable domestic one that is less commercially attractive. So reframing more the conversation towards renewables for increased productive use of water as a way of cross-subsidizing, how you do your business. Even in rural areas, you go to a village, in most cases, the borehole will always be probably one of the largest, centers of demand for your renewable energy source. So if you package your business not just around the borehole itself, but what are the other opportunities that this can draw for your renewable power business? It's like an anchor tenant in a mall. You have your borehole water infrastructure as your tenant, customer there, but then you see the other business opportunities that will come around because of the presence of this borehole that will generate more returns, for your renewable power supply business in that particular context. That, in a way, sort of addresses that barrier that only sees, water for people as not a very viable business opportunity for renewable power supply. Then the second issue is, sort of a governance issue. For the most part, water operators and electricity operator systems sort of operate in different regulatory frameworks. In several countries, there are different ministries, there are several different regulators, but there's a trend where a lot of the countries are having water and energy under one ministry, one regulator. But that regulatory framework creates a big barrier on how the business develops, the sector develops. An example is, an urban water utility that wants to transition from, diesel systems to grid systems and develop more renewable energy sources for their pumping system, their treatment system. They have to navigate a very complex regulatory framework. They have to get approvals from electricity regulator, tariff structure from a water regulator, and that sort of slows down, stymies the progress of transiting towards more renewable energy investment in water supply. So if that upstream policy reforms to have more aligned governance system that is more encouraging for water utilities and water operators to accelerate their transitions towards more renewable energy sources, we'll see a lot more uptake of renewables for water infrastructure development. And the third barrier is the creditworthiness of water utilities. For the most part, a lot of water utilities, struggle with financial sustainability, and in rural areas, single small standalone systems does not prevent a very viable opportunity for business for investment for private sector. So that keeps a lot of us up late at night, trying to work with utilities to enhance the operational efficiency, to be more creditworthy, to attract more private capital that will bring in more investors in renewable energy into their systems. But in the rural areas, there's a big push towards more aggregated portfolios, where you aggregate a large number of independent rural water supply schemes into one scheme that provides a bigger volume of viable business, so that you don't a private investor doesn't need to have 200 individual power purchase agreements with 200 individual schemes, but rather you aggregate it into one business, one operator, so you have one PPA with one operator that provides a larger scope of business opportunity. So if we are able to sort of progressively address some of the barriers, we'll see a lot more uptake of renewable investment in water infrastructure to tap into the opportunity that we see is largely there, but it's significant. It's still not very much tapped into. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much. The next question is going to be to Santillana, but please try to keep it, all of you, to 2 minutes, because otherwise we won't have time to interact with the audience. So let's try to focus on that. So my question to you is, as a locally led business, which is operating in the section of the renewables and industry at the same time, what is your experience in access to finance, which is always the main challenge, and what partnerships do you think could be useful to grow in this space and to create a more responsive landscape in building green industrial capacity in the region?
Thanks, Irene. You want it in 2 minutes? I can do it in 30 seconds. We need more money. We need for people to understand that the missing middle needs more money, and it needs to be understood for what it is. We do not have the capacity to do what the big players are doing. We can only showcase what we have done so far. as far as the big money is concerned, or what needs to be done for us, honestly, it's at this point, in my experience, I think we, as the players of my size, we need to stop looking for funding with big DFIs and whatnot. Maybe what the DFIs can help is come into our realm, speak to the local banks. They need to speak to the local banks in the sense that they need to help them change their policies. To do so is maybe elaborate a scheme to provide guarantees whereby they will be the first ones to take the risk should we default. It would very much de-risk the opportunity for us to get the funding. If the local banks are able to see that they are backed, they'll give us loans and capacity in terms of financing. The other thing maybe we could think of is, for example, I come from Burundi. In Burundi, we have a huge problem with FX. We are not having access to FX easily, so we have to think of schemes. So whenever the big donors are coming to Burundi, I think what they need to think of is a scheme whereby they provide the FX to the local banks and then provide a facility for us to be able to repay in local currency. So there needs to be a way to peg our franc to the dollar or whatever hard currency is out there, and to provide us with maybe funding in dollars through the banks for us to repay in Burundi francs, and the Burundi francs that we will have repaid for those loans can also be pulled into funds to smaller companies than ours that don't require such funding in terms of hard currency, because we can still supply those smaller companies with what they need without having them go through the whole logistics and the whole need of importing goods. So there it is. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Santillan, and thank you for stepping to the time. So the next question is going to be first to Tobias, because I think it makes more sense, because what I'm going to ask you is on the green industrial development. We often talk about the policy level, that we need a certain policy to be able to deliver, blah, blah. So my question to you is, what are the main barriers you are identifying, and what conditions need to be in place for this model to scale? And that's why then Jackson can go on to that.
So I'll try to also stick to my 2 minutes, which is why I will only mention 2 barriers of many more that we've been discussing here at this conference. The first one I'll mention, and I think I'll have your support there, is we need more money, is what you said, and I agree, and we need it particularly, we need risk-taking money, we need equity to grow more mini-grids out there. That's just my bottom line. We are far behind in reaching underserved communities, and industrialization requires power, period. My second point is more focusing on C&I and utility, and I think the biggest barrier we as a developer I experience when we develop power generation projects is actually the grid and grid infrastructure. So both on the transmission and the distribution side. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of focus needs to be spent on making sure the generated power, that's the easy part, reaches a wide variety of off-takers.
Thank you so much. So building on to that, my question to Jackson is going to be on strengthening regional value chains like manufacturing, but also water, for instance. It requires coordinated action across border, but what do you exactly see is the progress being made to harmonize policies and investment frameworks? But at the same time, I would like to ask you also for the gaps that are still holding back the idea of the full integration.
Yep, so for me, I see also a lot of effort going towards harmonization of policies at the continental level and also at the regional level. Of course, the continent have the action plan for accelerated industrial development for Africa with very specific priorities on policy, on the product and export distribution across the continent, infrastructure development, and resource mobilization. Also for resource mobilization, for example, we have the African Green Industrialization Initiative, where they are mobilizing 100 billion from African banks to accelerate industrial development. But on top of that, there is a lot of talk on transition of our minerals and natural resources for value addition. But I think there might be a step we are missing. It is not automatic. Whatever we mine can be processed locally. That is, a manufacturing industry will not be installed or developed like within the natural resource. What is on the ground? Yes, we have the natural resource, but we don't have the electricity. And that is now where we are seeing a lot of coordinated effort to integrate the electricity system in the power pools. There, we will provide the electricity when and where it is needed at the right time, and reliable at that. Then we see a lot of now focus on planning of infrastructure in terms of corridor-based. It's not more about a single siloed infrastructure, but corridor-based infrastructure across the continent. And there also, as GIZ, we are supporting with integrated corridors for economic development because we want to have investable regional corridors, including special economic zones across these corridors, as well as aggregation hubs for the small-scale industries, because Africa is based on cottage industries, that is the small-scale industries, and then these have to go to green manufacturing. We have to find a way of aggregation so that we can do cross-border trade. Of course, there are gaps, obvious ones, transmission and generation of electricity gaps because of what my colleagues have expressed, and there what we are doing is more focus is being put on independent power transmission lines, and that is where we are helping also to structure these projects and accelerate them to bankability so that the development of the transmission lines is there to evacuate the power to where it is much needed in the industries. Because when we don't do that, what are the industries doing? They are going back and developing their own energies. But we need now to integrate this. It's not a bad thing, but somehow we need to integrate this so that we can share the energy which is being developed. Of course, there's the execution capacity, and we are helping a lot of capacity development in the corridor of electricity development, infrastructure development, and trade. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we are just going to now make a pause and leave the audience, in the case you have questions, to just raise your hand, and we will have a microphone. So, yeah, I see a couple of people here and there. So 1, 2, 3, yeah. Just a kind reminder, please keep your questions brief and in the form of question, not a 10-minute comment, please.
Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers. My name is Mark Spratt. I lead a project at Swansea University that is funded by the UK's FCDO. And what we're looking to is to find pathways to manufacturing of solar in Africa. And we're talking about from the ground up. Now, clearly there's a lot of energy required in establishing a manufacturing industry like that. My question is principally to Jackson, and I agree fully we need a Pan-African grid if we're to have that kind of level of reliable, significant electricity available. I was very interested that you commented about the grid, the connection between Egypt and South Africa. If solar is to become the backbone of Africa's electricity supply, then a grid between East and West would potentially be more valuable. Africa spans 68 degrees of longitude, which means the sun rises in Somalia 4 hours before it rises in Senegal. Now, this is an approach being taken in other sort of regions where the solar then can be utilized in Somalia, but then exported to Senegal later in the day as people's patterns move. I'm just very interested to know, with the work you're doing and the African Master Plan for Energy, whether this is in consideration and where that might be in the pipeline.
Thank you. Let's first take all the questions and then we can answer. So please, there were here 2 people. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Alinta. I work for a rural water utility. So my question is also for James, because it's on water. You had an interesting suggestion where you kind of encouraged water operators to say they should follow where the money is, basically, and go to the more...
can you maybe get me a micro close?
Yes.
Thank you.
So follow where the money is and go and encourage operators to go where there is more demand, so the agriculture and the industry, to kind of cross-subsidize the users, which would definitely make the model more bankable. But unlike the energy sector, and especially operating in many francophone countries, the difference with the energy sector is, I guess, that we inherit infrastructure that is either already there, or the operator is very little involved in the actual design of all the infrastructure. So my question would be, how do you see that model work in situations where we don't have that much influence over the infrastructure that we operate?
Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to all panelists. My question is directed to Jackson. My name is Uthomboi. I'm an independent consultant within the renewable energy space in Kenya and East Africa. What is the opportunity for manufacturing MSMEs in the renewable energy space, and what targeted interventions are being made to make sure that they're not left behind in the just transition?
Thank you very much. So you can address the questions now? I don't think, is any other hand raised? No? Okay. In that case, what I suggest is, because we have 8 more minutes, so on the top of that, I would like to ask a general question so everyone can participate, and it's really about the question of green industrialization and how that is going to happen. In the sense, and that's a question also for the people on the investment side. My question to you is, in Europe, there's been already some questions about the cost of electricity, the cost of the grid, how do you integrate renewable, etc. So I would like to understand also, how do you think that green industrialization can go to scale in the southern and eastern part of Africa? So just try to take 2 minutes per person, because we have like 8 minutes remaining, and we can go in order. So Jan, the floor is yours.
So I think from an investment side, replying a little bit to the first question, is of course we also see lack of transmission lines and interconnected countries as well. So we are now also actively looking to finance transmission companies in different African countries to ensure that they can build transmission lines to connect different countries with each other, so that energy can flow from one country to another where demand is and also where the supply is, to make sure that these are more aligned with each other. Of course, these are investments with high capex amounts and long tenors, so they take quite some time before they are there. But it's something DFIs acknowledge, and where we really looking into investments together with MDBs to finance those elements, also to ensure that industrialization can have access to energy when they need it.
Thank you very much, Jackson.
I think I'll respond more to Alina. If I got you right, I mean, your question was more of how there can be more working together between energy infrastructure. No, I think these the barrier has been, looking at an individual infrastructure project as a water project and an energy project. What if we sort of look at it more as an integrated energy and water supply, project, then structure the financing instruments and the project development in a way that looks at the integrated, nature of that. A lot of the rural water supply schemes which you are working on were developed many years ago when it was developed as purely a water supply project. So a lot of them are put up with diesel pumping systems that are no longer viable. So there's a lot of efforts to retrofit, the existing diesel systems, with more greener renewable energy power supply systems. I'm just involved in a project in the coastal area of Kenya. Most of the the utility. There are about 5 utilities in the coastal region of Kenya. They get their water from one major source, a series of 15 high-capacity boreholes. And over the last 40 years of its existence, they've been using like $150,000 every month to pay the utility power supply, which you can imagine has many years of arrears. So we have supported them, and they're putting a 1.3 megawatt mini grid to power this series of 15 bulk water systems. And you see that a lot, it requires a little bit of, reconfiguring the infrastructure in most cases to fit in the new introduction of, a renewable power supply source. But I think the opportunity, the advocacy we are pushing for, there's opportunity for, networks like the Rural Water Supply Network to work together with Alliance for Renewable Electrification to advocate for more water energy nexus, financing and project development instruments that don't see this as separate, initiatives, but, two sides of the same coin in terms of providing a critical, access. Because at the end of the day, if you overlay the maps of people without access to electricity and the people without access to water, especially in rural areas, essentially they are the same people. So it provides a very strong case for more concerted, collaborative efforts for the two sectors to work, in a more connected, approach in advancing, access to both electricity and water. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think to your question of how we can scale, Jackson, the plan they have with the interconnectivity of the power pool, I think it would be absolutely the way to go, especially with the question that the gentleman asked earlier. If indeed we're able to provide solar energy that goes from east to west, whereby the west is consuming whatever the east is consuming at the beginning, and then vice versa, and we pull everything there, because I think if we want to move forward, we have to aggregate everything everyone is doing, and connect and provide all the energy which will be available. And as far as I'm concerned, from where I'm from, if we have an aggregation of energy, it means we'll have to aggregate grids, we'll have to standardize everything, which will make it more stable and therefore more usable. So for me, absolutely power to you, Jackson. Keep on doing the power pools.
Perfect. Yeah, so thanks also for the questions, my friend there. In the Africa Single Electricity Market Strategy, actually we have a component on local manufacturing of PV and battery energy storage systems. The question is, will we be competitive compared to China, where we are getting most of this stuff? That is a question we have to answer as Africa. And for our support, we are supporting the whole of Africa. I mean, East Africa and South Africa are our priority because they are the leading power pools in terms of integration. The line between Tanzania and Zambia is much more advanced, and very soon those two power pools will start trading. Not to say we are ignoring the other power pools, we are working there. In the West Africa power pool, we have been supporting them for the last 10 years, and we are happy that the market is now operational, and very soon they will be launching the day-ahead market for power trading within the, I think, 16 member states in the West Africa power pool. However, we have a big challenge with the Central Africa power pool. Of course, the systems are not developed there. The power generation systems are not as solid, and also the transmission lines. So to say, it is not being ignored. There are a lot of effort which is going to also Central Africa power pool, especially by the World Bank and the Africa Development Bank. So once they establish these national transmission systems and the interconnectors, then that will be the missing middle to connect the East and the West. That is coming, and it is under the AFSEM Vision 2040. On my friend there, colleague on manufacturing and MSMEs, I mean, SMEs are the backbone of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, because that is the nature of the African business. And no one will be left behind, and that is where a lot of effort is being put into. For GIZ, we have a support to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and most of these SMEs, we are supporting them in terms of improvement of the quality of their products and compliance with the standards. Because to trade across the Africa, then we must have these standards. And indeed, within the energy system, we are working also at the national level, especially in providing renewable electricity for green production. We need green products also at the MSME level. And there we have our program on NDEF, where we are working, going forward with the 6 member states, but of course with potential to support all the African countries. And we have a green cooling initiative where we are piloting also new technologies. I mean, my conclusion is so to say that at the stage where we are as Africa, the price is right in terms of the renewable energy. The levelized cost of energy is competitive to other energy technologies. The technology is mature in terms of variability. We have technologies now to integrate variable renewable energies, batteries and power system management technologies. The financing is available, but what is missing to accelerate this is at the policy level. And that is where we are putting a lot of effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will just pick up right from there, Jackson, because you kind of took my summary away. So policy not only at national level, but I would add also at local and regional level, allowing utilities and private players to trade on grids, to be able to wheel for municipalities to become utilities to buy and sell electricity. We have way too many projects that are stuck because the one national utility off-taker is not bankable, while there would be plenty of private sector companies that could sign bankable PPAs, but the frameworks are not in place in all countries to permit this. So I think that is an enabler to unlock a lot of green industrialization potential in rural but also in urban areas to make sure electricity finds its bankable off-takers.
Thank you so much. So the panel is coming to an end, so please everyone join me in a big thank you to our panelists and for their insights. Thank you so much. And just before the coffee break, there's Tobias Merkel from Solar 23 that wanted to do an announcement, right? Okay, just to confirm. So again, thank you very much to our panelists. And just after the announcement, there will be a coffee break outside, so thank you very much.
So I will not keep you away long from the break. It will be a short announcement. We at Solar 23, we are one of the dinosaurs, I would say, even in the rural business until now. But during the last months now, we negotiated and discussed, and now finally I can announce that we take over a very well-known brand in the C&I business. So the company Redavia, which is active in Nairobi in Kenya, in the C&I business, which is active in Ghana, which is active in Tanzania. We are now taking over. We are taking over all the 50 systems. They are until now in operations. And we are looking proud forward now to be one of the players also in the C&I business with full service to all the customers, to the end customers, to the production companies, that they can now with financed from European side, financed from international side, produce their products with full service from our side, from Redavia, with a lease-to-own model and standardized systems from the PV side. So Redavia is now back. I think it's well known over the past 12 years now, and with a new management we will take over and bring Redavia back on a very good track and growth for the coming years. Thank you.